A 10-year-old girl stood outside the tall gates of a billionaire's mansion, holding a small basket of fruit she was trying to sell so she could buy medicine for her sick mother. She had been turned away from 6 houses already, but something about this place pulled her in. Maybe it was the size, maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the hope that someone inside would care enough to help. But nothing prepared her for what she saw once the gates finally opened. The moment she stepped inside, her eyes landed on a giant framed photograph hanging near the staircase. Her mother's face, years younger, smiling as if she belonged there. Her heart jumped. Her hands shook. Her voice barely escaped her lips as she looked up at the billionaire standing above her and asked, "Why is my mom's picture in your mansion?" He froze. His expression tightened for a split second. So quick she almost missed it. Almost. And right there, everything changed. Before we go deeper into this unbelievable journey, welcome to Souls and Riches Stories, where real-life lessons meet life-changing moments. If you're new here, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you never miss a story that might keep you thinking long after it ends. And hey, drop a comment and tell me which country you're watching from. It honestly amazes me how people from all over the world gather here for these stories. Now, back to that girl. Standing inside a place she never imagined entering. She expected kindness, maybe a purchase, maybe a simple conversation. She did not expect to feel the air shift around her as if she had just stepped into someone else's past. She did not expect the billionaire to look at her as though he recognized something. Something he wasn't ready to admit. And she definitely didn't expect what he told his security guard next. Because instead of answering her question, he gave an order that would flip her entire world upside down. Lila grew up in the kind of neighborhood most people sped through without stopping. Rows of aging apartment blocks sat shoulder to shoulder, paint fading, stair rails rusted from years of neglect. At night, distant sirens echoed more than laughter. Delivery trucks passed more often than residents walking their dogs. Life here was about getting through the week, not planning for the future. At 10 years old, Lila had already learned what adults called responsibility, though she simply saw it as helping her mother, Angela. Angela had been a strong woman once, working 2 jobs, saving every spare dollar, making sure her daughter never felt the weight of poverty. But lately her strength had faded. A long-term illness forced her to spend most days in bed, sitting upright only when the pain allowed. Their apartment reflected their situation. Bills gathered on the kitchen counter like unwanted visitors. A half-working fan pushed warm air around the living room. Their fridge was rarely full. Some nights, Lila drank water and pretended she wasn't hungry because Angela always insisted on giving her the bigger share of whatever they had. The landlord had stopped being patient. A notice slid under their door almost every month. Past due. Final warning. Words that made Angela press her hands against her forehead in frustration. But even at her young age, Lila refused to let fear swallow her. She had a quiet determination, the kind that didn't come from pep talks or inspirational posters. It came from watching her mother gasp through pain, but still try to smile. It came from seeing Angela push herself to sit at the table each morning just to check Lila's homework before sending her off to school. Eventually, Angela's condition worsened. Hospital visits became frequent, and the cost of medication became impossible to meet. There were days Angela whispered apologies for not being able to provide. Days she apologized for being unable to stand long enough to cook. Lila always answered the same way. "It's okay, Mom. I can handle things." She meant it. One afternoon, after overhearing the landlord threaten to change the locks, Lila made a decision. She grabbed the small wooden crate they once used for picnics, washed it in the sink and filled it with oranges she bought cheaply at a street market. The vendor knew her situation and always slipped in a few extra pieces. She thanked him, tied her hair into a ponytail, and set off toward the wealthy district across town. Her plan was simple. Sell oranges to whoever would buy them. Her hope was even simpler. Earn enough to cover at least one pending bill. That first day, she walked for hours. Expensive cars rolled past, and spotless lawns stretched in front of houses that seemed larger than her entire apartment building. She didn't resent the difference. She just wished she could bring home enough money so her mother wouldn't cry in the bathroom where she thought no one could hear. A woman in a gym outfit bought 2 oranges. A gardener bought 1. A group of teenagers ignored her completely. Still, Lila kept going. Over the following weeks, her routine became steady. She woke early, checked on Angela, reheated small meals, and prayed nothing would happen to her mother while she was out. Then she walked to the wealthy neighborhood with her crate, calling out softly, "Fresh oranges, please support." Some days were good. Some were painfully slow. But every dollar she earned felt like she was pushing their life forward, even if only by an inch. Back home, Angela worried constantly. The thought of her daughter walking alone across town made her chest tighten. But they had run out of choices, and Angela knew her illness forced her daughter to grow up faster than any child should. Despite everything, Lila still carried a spark of hope. She often told Angela that things would change someday, that life wouldn't always be like this. Angela would smile gently, though her eyes carried a hint of fear and guilt. Then one morning, on a day that started like all the others, Lila entered a gated street she had never visited before. She had been saving this route for last, knowing only the wealthiest residents lived there. She told herself that today might finally be the day she earned enough for her mother's medication. She didn't know that a single house on that street, massive, spotless, and guarded, was about to twist her entire world. She didn't know her mother's past lived behind those doors. And she certainly didn't know that inside that mansion hung a photograph that would make her question everything she thought she knew. She was about to step into a truth her mother never prepared her for. The gated street felt different from the rest of the neighborhood. The hedges were trimmed with sharp edges, the sidewalks polished, and the air so still it felt almost frozen. Lila held her crate close as she walked, her sneakers making soft taps against the smooth pavement. The houses here weren't just large, they looked like private kingdoms. But one property stood above the rest. At the end of the road sat a mansion so wide it felt like it stretched from one horizon to the other. Glass walls shimmered under the sunlight. A stone driveway wrapped around a fountain, tall enough to block the view of the front entrance. The security gate alone looked more expensive than her entire apartment building. She approached slowly, unsure if she should even try. People in places like this didn't usually open their doors to kids selling fruit, especially not ones wearing worn-out shoes and carrying a crate with fading paint. But she needed the money. Her mother needed the medicine. So she gathered her courage and pressed the intercom button. A soft beep echoed. For a moment, there was silence. Then a man's voice came through. Deep, steady, and slightly tired. "Yes?" Lila swallowed. "Sorry to bother you, sir. I'm selling oranges. They're fresh. I'm trying to raise money for my mom's medicine." Another pause. Not the cold rejection she expected. Not a quick, "No, thank you." Just silence, as if the person on the other end wasn't sure what to say. Finally, the voice returned, sounding more focused this time. "How old are you?" 10. "What's your name?" "Lila." There was a longer stretch of silence now. She shifted her weight nervously. The fountain trickled behind her. Birds perched on the iron gate but didn't move. Then the man spoke again, this time with a strange softness. "Do you mind looking toward the camera?" She glanced up at the small security lens above the intercom and lifted her chin slightly. Another pause. A subtle, shaky breath came through the speaker, barely audible. "Wait there," he said. "Please." The gate unlocked with a slow metallic click. The movement startled her. Most residents here ignored her, but this gate opened like she was expected. She stepped inside cautiously. The pathway to the mansion stretched far, lined with palm trees that rustled gently. The closer she got, the more she noticed something unusual. The place felt both grand and strangely empty. Every window was spotless, every light fixture perfect. But the stillness hinted that the owner didn't enjoy any of it. A man finally appeared at the doorway, tall, well-dressed in a tailored shirt and slacks. Silver streaks touched the sides of his hair. His posture strong, though his eyes carried a quiet weariness. Jonathan Hale, one of the most talked-about tech investors in the country. People called him brilliant, intense, private, and sometimes unpredictable. His companies shaped phones, cars, even medical systems. And yet here he stood, alone at his doorway, staring at a child like her was someone he had been waiting years to meet. He stepped closer, studying her face with an expression she couldn't interpret. Not pity, not curiosity, something deeper. "You said your name is Lila, right?" he asked gently. "Yes, sir." He stared at her for a moment longer, his eyes drifting from her features to her crate, then back again. "How much are your oranges?" he asked. $2 each. He nodded, but he didn't reach for his wallet. He just kept looking at her, almost frozen. Lila suddenly felt uncomfortable. "Sir, do you want to buy one?" she whispered. Jonathan blinked as though waking from a long thought. Yes, I do." But he still didn't move. Instead, he stepped aside and gestured toward the interior. "Come in for a moment. I won't keep you long. I just want to ask you something." Lila hesitated. Entering a stranger's mansion, not something a child should do. But the sincerity in his voice didn't feel threatening, and something about the way he looked at her, almost like he recognized her. She stepped through the door, her eyes widened instantly. The foyer soared high above her, decorated with rare sculptures and paintings that probably cost more than every apartment on her street combined. But one thing stood out more than the luxury, a single framed photograph on the far wall. Jonathan followed her gaze, his expression tightened. That photo, that woman. Lila's breath caught. She knew that face. She saw it every morning. It was her mother. The air inside Jonathan Hale's mansion felt colder than the outside breeze. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. It was spotless, serene, and almost too quiet, like the building had been waiting a long time for footsteps other than the owners. Jonathan guided Lila toward the kitchen, a room bigger than her entire apartment. Marble counters stretched across the space, and spotless steel appliances gleamed under soft lighting. Without asking many questions, he opened a cabinet, pulled out a plate, and filled it with food. Sandwiches, fruit slices, and a small carton of juice. "You should eat," he said, stepping back, giving her space. Her stomach clenched with hunger the moment the food was in front of her. She hadn't eaten since early morning, and even then, it had only been a reheated leftover. She whispered a small "thank you," then began eating carefully, trying not to appear too desperate, even though she wanted to devour everything on the plate. Jonathan stood a few feet away, watching without speaking, as if he didn't want to interrupt whatever storm was running through her mind, or his own. Every minute, he glanced toward the hallway, his jaw tightening each time. He seemed nervous, almost unsettled. After finishing half the plate, Lila wiped her hands and looked around. Pictures lined the hallway outside the kitchen. Beautiful frames, carefully arranged. She excused herself softly and stepped out to look closer. Some photos showed Jonathan at award ceremonies. Others showed him standing beside influential people, politicians, entrepreneurs, donors. But one photo froze her completely. A younger Jonathan stood beside a woman with soft eyes, long dark hair, and a smile full of life. A woman in a simple blue dress. A woman whose face Lila knew more than her own reflection. Her mother. Angela. Not sick, not pale, not exhausted. The woman in the frame looked vibrant, radiant even. Lila's hand trembled as she lifted the picture off the wall. Her throat tightened. The room swayed slightly, a rush of confusion crashing into her chest. Why was this here? Why was her mother smiling beside a billionaire she had never mentioned? Footsteps behind her. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Jonathan turned the corner, and the moment he saw what she was holding, he stopped in place. His breath caught audibly. For a second, he looked like someone had punched the air out of him. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared, first at the photograph, then at Lila's face, then back again, as if comparing the two. The tension between them tightened the air around them. Lila held the picture against her chest like a shield. Why? Why is my mom in your house? Her voice cracked on the last word. Jonathan swallowed hard. His expression shifted. Shock, guilt, recognition. He opened his mouth slightly, but no sound came out. He pressed a hand against the wall to steady himself. For a man known across the country for confident speeches and decisive leadership, this moment stripped all authority from him. He looked shaken. Lila's heart raced faster. "Do you know her?" she whispered. Jonathan lowered his gaze, then slowly lifted it again, his voice barely above a breath. "Yes," he said. But the single word sounded heavy, like it carried a weight he had carried alone for years. Silence stretched between them, long, fragile, sharp. Lila tightened her grip on the frame. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Nothing made sense. She felt her knees weaken slightly. Jonathan stepped closer, then stopped halfway, unsure if he should move any further. "That picture," he said, his voice strained, "was taken a long time ago." "How long?" she asked. He hesitated. "Before you were born." Lila's eyes widened. Her breath hitched. Jonathan's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with a truth he had kept locked away far too long. He exhaled slowly, as if preparing himself for something he had been avoiding for years. "Lila," he said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." Lila held the framed photo tightly, her small hands shaking. Her mother's smile felt like a ghost in the room, too real, too close, too unexplained. She looked up at Jonathan, her voice thin but steady. "Why is my mom's picture here?" Jonathan didn't answer immediately. His shoulders lowered, and he ran a hand through his hair as though trying to steady himself. The man who dominated boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals now stood trembling in front of a 10-year-old girl. He motioned toward a nearby sitting area. Let's sit for a moment." Lila followed him reluctantly, keeping the photograph clutched to her chest. Jonathan lowered himself into a chair but didn't lean back. He sat on the edge, elbows on his knees, fingers interlocked, like someone preparing to confess something heavy. "What's your mother's name?" he asked quietly. "Angela." The sound of that name hit him hard. His jaw tightened. His eyes closed for a brief second, and he exhaled like the word had opened an old wound. "And your last name?" he continued. "Brooks." At that, Jonathan's eyes widened just slightly, enough for Lila to notice. His own heartbeat seemed to echo through the room. "She never told you about me, did she?" he whispered. Lila frowned. "I don't know who you are." Jonathan nodded slowly, absorbing those words as if they confirmed something he feared. He stared at the floor for a few seconds before speaking again. "When I met your mother," he said carefully, "she wasn't the woman you know today. She was full of confidence, strong, stubborn when she wanted to be. She always believed she could fix her own problems, no matter how big they were." His voice softened as he spoke, like every memory carried both pride and regret. Lila shifted uncomfortably. "So, you knew her? Really knew her?" Jonathan swallowed. "Yes, I did." "How?" she pressed. He flinched slightly, not from the question but from the truth pressing against his throat. "It was many years ago, long before you were born. She worked at a community center near one of my early office buildings. I volunteered there sometimes when I wasn't traveling. We crossed paths often." Lila studied him, trying to judge whether he was telling her everything. Jonathan rubbed his palms together, a gesture of tension he couldn't hide. "Your mother was kind. She had this quiet fire inside her. She pushed me more than most people did. Back then, everything in my life revolved around work. Numbers, meetings, deals. I kept telling myself I didn't have time for anything else." He paused as if choosing his next words carefully. "But your mother, she made time feel different." Lila's grip on the photo loosened. "Were you friends?" Jonathan hesitated long enough to make the silence feel heavy. "Yes," he said finally. "Friends. But—" He stopped, the next part refusing to leave his throat. "But what?" Lila asked. Jonathan looked away, his expression clouded. Some things aren't easy to explain. A knot formed in Lila's stomach. She wasn't sure if he was hiding something or struggling to express it. His eyes flickered between the photograph and her face, as though he was comparing details he didn't want to acknowledge. "You look a lot like her when she was young," he said quietly. Lila felt her pulse jump. "Everyone says I look like my mom." He nodded slowly. "Yes, but there's something else. Something in your eyes. Something familiar." She didn't understand, but she sensed the weight behind his words. Jonathan leaned back slightly, staring at the ceiling as if searching for courage. "I cared about your mother more than I should have," he admitted. Lila's heart thumped. "What does that mean?" Jonathan pressed his lips together. "It means our connection was complicated. Life pulled us in different directions, and I didn't handle it well." "Why didn't she ever tell me about you?" Lila asked. He stared at her with a look filled with regret. "Because I failed her." Her breath caught. Jonathan leaned forward, voice low and heavy. "And I've lived with that choice ever since." But he didn't reveal everything. Not yet. He wasn't ready, and Lila felt it. Whatever truth he was holding back was bigger than she imagined. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen. Lila sat stiffly, clutching the photograph in her lap. Jonathan's gaze stayed fixed on her. Filled with questions he seemed afraid to ask. He cleared his throat softly, his voice unsteady. "Lila, can I ask you something important?" She nodded, though her fingers gripped the edge of the frame tightly. "Do you have a father in your life?" he asked. The question hit her harder than she expected. She lowered her eyes. "No," she whispered. "Mom never talks about him. I don't even know his name." Jonathan inhaled sharply. His hand trembled against his knee. "So you've never met him? Not once?" She shook her head. "Mom said he wasn't around. That's all she ever told me." Jonathan leaned back, covering his mouth with his hand. His eyes glistened with something close to fear. Fear of a truth he had never prepared himself to face. "And she raised you alone?" he added quietly. "Yes, always just the two of us." He exhaled slowly and rubbed his forehead. "I see." Lila watched him closely. The way he shifted in his seat. The way his breathing changed. The way his eyes kept returning to her face, almost comparing her features to memories he hadn't touched in years. For the first time, she sensed that he wasn't just surprised to see her, he was shaken by what she represented. "Why are you acting like this?" she asked softly. "Do you think you know something about my father?" Jonathan lowered his hand. "I'm not certain," he said, voice strained, "but there's a possibility." Lila's heartbeat quickened. A possibility of what? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked onto hers with a depth that made her chest tighten. "Lila," he said slowly, "if your mother is Angela Brooks, and if she never mentioned your father, then I need to see her. I need to speak with her myself." Lila swallowed hard. "Why?" Jonathan closed his eyes briefly before answering. "Because your mother and I were close, closer than I admitted earlier. And the timing," he paused, struggling to steady his breath. "The timing makes me wonder." Lila's stomach twisted. She didn't fully understand, but the suggestion echoed loudly in her mind. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slim wallet. From it, he took several bills, more money than Lila had ever seen someone hand over so casually. He placed them gently on the table in front of her. "This is for your mother's medicine," he said. "Please take it. She needs proper care." Lila stared at the stack, stunned. "I can't take all that." "You can," he insisted gently, "and you must." He then reached for a notepad and scribbled a number, tearing off the sheet and handing it to her with hands that still trembled slightly. "This is my personal phone number," he said. "Not an assistant, not an office line, mine." Lila took the paper, still in shock. "If anything changes with your mother," he added, "call me, anytime, day or night." She nodded slowly, overwhelmed. Jonathan stood, his expression filled with urgency. "Lila, please, take me to her. I need to see Angela." "You want to come now?" she asked. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Your mother and I have unfinished history, and I think it's time to face it." Lila clutched the photograph to her chest. Her world already felt upside down, and now it was about to turn again. Lila ran through the streets with the envelope of money pressed tightly against her chest and Jonathan's number tucked into her pocket. The sky had begun to dim, and the closer she got to her apartment complex, the more the world shifted back into its familiar roughness. Cracked sidewalks, flickering lights, neighbors arguing over nothing, and the constant hum of exhaustion that settled over their building like a heavy blanket. Her shoes slapped against the stairs as she climbed. On the second floor, she slowed, her breath uneven. She pushed open the door, and the moment she stepped inside, the stale warmth of the apartment hit her. "Mom?" she called softly. Angela stirred on the couch. Her thin hands clutched a blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes, tired but searching, widened with relief when she saw her daughter. "Lila, you're back. You took so long. I was getting worried." Lila hurried to her and knelt beside the couch. "I'm okay, Mom. I got the money for your medicine. We can go tomorrow first thing." Angela touched her daughter's cheek, her fingertips trembling. "Thank you, baby. I just needed to know you were safe." Lila placed the small paper bag of medicine beside her mother. Angela tried to sit up straighter, wincing slightly but determined. She seemed eager to hear what had taken her daughter so long. "What happened?" Angela asked gently. Lila sat on the floor, hugging her knees. She struggled to find the right place to begin. "I went farther than usual. to the street with the really big houses. I wanted to make more sales. Angela nodded. Did anyone buy from you? One man did, Lila said softly. A very rich man. He lives in a huge glass mansion at the end of the street. Angela's expression shifted, curiosity mixed with a hint of caution. And? Lila took a breath. Mom, I went inside. Angela froze. He invited me, Lila hurried to add. He wasn't scary. He gave me food. He asked about you. Her mother's eyes narrowed slightly. Asked about me? Why? Lila reached into her backpack and slowly pulled out the photograph she had wrapped in a piece of cloth. She held it carefully as though it might burn her fingers. Because of this, she whispered. Angela reached out, confused, but the moment her eyes landed on the picture, her entire body went rigid. Her hand jerked back. Her face drained of color. She stared so hard at the photograph it seemed she couldn't blink. Mom? Lila's voice wavered. Angela pressed a hand over her mouth. The sound she made was half gasp, half sob. Her shoulders trembled. Where did you get this? She whispered. It was hanging on his wall, Lila said. In his hallway. He didn't hide it. It was right there. Mom, why are you in his house? Angela shook her head slowly, her breath shortening. No, this can't be happening. You know him, Lila said quietly. Don't you? Angela closed her eyes, but tears slipped out anyway. His name? Did he tell you his name? Yes, Lila said. Jonathan Hale. Angela let out a sound so raw it made Lila's stomach twist. She grabbed the edge of the couch, steadying herself like the room was spinning. I never wanted you anywhere near him, she whispered. Never. Why? Lila begged. He wasn't mean. He gave me money for your medicine. He wants to see you. Angela's eyes snapped open with panic. He wants to see me? Yes. Angela's breathing grew shallow. The blanket slipped from her shoulders. Lila, listen to me carefully. That man, Jonathan, he and I, we had a past, a long time ago, before everything in my life fell apart. You loved him? Lila whispered. Angela swallowed hard. Yes, I did. Then why did you leave? Angela's gaze drifted far away, as if she were watching memories she had buried long ago. Because I had to, she said softly. Because staying would have destroyed both of us. And because I found out something that changed everything. Lila felt the air thicken. Mom, what did you find out? Angela gripped her daughter's wrist, her voice barely audible. That man is more connected to your life than you realize. Lila's heart pounded. Mom, what does that mean? Angela looked straight into her daughter's eyes. Fear and sorrow mixed together. It means Jonathan Hale was never supposed to know about you. Lila's breath caught in her throat. The truth was no longer just close. It was closing in on both of them. Angela sat propped against the thin pillows, her breath still shaky, her eyes glossy with the weight of memories she'd buried for nearly 2 decades. Lila sat at the edge of the bed, holding her mother's trembling hand, waiting, anxious, confused, scared to finally hear the truth. For a long moment, Angela stared at the peeling walls of their small apartment, as though the past were written there, painfully clear. Then she exhaled slowly, shakily. Lila, the man you saw today, Jonathan Hale, I knew him. Her voice cracked on the last words. Lila's heart thudded. She had expected fear, denial, anything but this quiet, heartbreaking confirmation. You knew him? How? Why was your picture in his house? Angela closed her eyes, gathering strength. It started almost 20 years ago, she began softly. Back then, I was working as a receptionist at a startup his family had invested in. I was young, new in the city, trying to survive. And Jonathan, he wasn't a billionaire then. He was just a shy, brilliant young man trying to escape the shadow of his family's empire. She gave a weak smile, nostalgic, bittersweet. He would come to the front desk almost every morning. Not for files, not for mail, just to talk. Her cheeks flushed lightly with an emotion Lila had never seen in her mother before. He liked hearing about my day, my dreams, my silly apartment disasters. He said being around me made him feel normal. Lila felt something tighten in her chest. So you two were together? Angela nodded slowly. We fell in love, quietly, deeply, without meaning to. He took me on drives outside the city, away from everything. We'd sit near the river for hours. He'd talk about building things that mattered. I'd talk about wanting a better life for the family I might one day have. We were young, and for a while, I believed love was enough. Her voice trembled again, and Lila gently held her mother's hand. What happened? Lila whispered. Angela swallowed hard. His family. She said the words like they were poison. The Hales, they were wealthy, powerful, and proud. To them, Jonathan was their legacy, their investment. They didn't want him distracted, especially not with a poor girl from a broken neighborhood. Lila's eyes widened. Her mother continued. They started watching him, interfering. One night, I overheard two of his relatives at a fundraiser. They said I was a threat, a liability, that I was beneath the Hale name, that if Jonathan didn't give me up, they'd cut him off entirely, or worse, control every aspect of his life. Angela wiped her cheek. I tried to talk to him. He kept telling me not to worry, that he'd stand up for us, that he'd protect what we had. Her voice broke. And then I found out I was pregnant. Lila froze. The words hovered heavy between them, thick and undeniable. I planned to tell him, Angela said softly. I wrote him a letter, a long one. I explained everything, the baby, my fears, my hope that we could face it together. She laughed bitterly. I never heard back. Lila's brows knit. He ignored you? No, Angela whispered. He never got the letter. She looked at her daughter with tired, haunted eyes. The Hale family intercepted it. They intercepted everything. Calls, messages, even the small gift I sent him when I was 3 months pregnant. I didn't know any of that at first. All I knew was Jonathan had disappeared. Lila's stomach twisted. He just vanished? He left the country for a business expansion project, or at least that's what his family told me. Angela shook her head. But later I learned the truth. They sent him away. They made sure he believed I was the one who walked away. Lila's throat tightened with anger. So both of you thought the other abandoned the relationship? Angela nodded. Exactly. It was all engineered. She wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. When I realized I was alone and expecting a child, I panicked. I told myself his family would never allow the baby to stay with me. They'd take custody, raise you as a Hale, and Jonathan, controlled by them, wouldn't be able to protect us, so I ran. Lila's eyes burned. Ran where? Anywhere they wouldn't follow. I moved from city to city, job to job, hiding my last name, keeping to myself. I wanted to raise you freely, safely, away from their reach. But that meant giving up everything, Lila whispered. Yes. Angela's eyes softened. But it also meant I kept you. And you, Lila, you were worth every sacrifice. Silence settled in the room, thick with revelation, heartbreak, and the raw weight of truth. Then Angela added, voice faint, I never thought our lives would collide with his again. I never thought he'd see you and recognize me in your face. Lila clasped her mother's hand more tightly. Mom, does he know about me? About us? Angela shook her head. No, he has no idea. And now, everything has changed. The doorbell rang sharply, cutting through the quiet hum of their apartment. Lila's heart raced as she ran to answer it, the folded paper in her pocket shaking slightly. She had called Jonathan Hale, barely finding the courage to speak, but insisting her mother needed to know the truth. Now, standing on the threshold was the man himself, tall, impeccably dressed, yet his eyes held the exhaustion of someone carrying years of regret. Lila stepped aside. Mom, he's here. Angela froze. Her thin hands clenched the edge of the couch. The sight of Jonathan in their modest apartment, his presence towering yet hesitant, brought a flood of memories she had tried to bury. She felt her knees weaken as the man who had once meant everything to her, yet whom she believed had abandoned her, stood only a few feet away. Jonathan's gaze fell on Angela, and everything changed. He saw her frail, weakened by illness and years of struggle, and his chest tightened painfully. His hand rose instinctively to cover his mouth as disbelief and sorrow mingled in his eyes. Angela. His voice was soft, almost breaking. I don't understand. I thought you left me, that you wanted nothing to do with me. Angela's breath hitched, but the fear, shame, and years of buried pain made words impossible at first. Then, with a trembling voice, she finally whispered, I didn't leave you, Jonathan. I was afraid. Afraid for you, afraid for our child, afraid your family would destroy everything I loved. Jonathan stepped closer, each movement slow and deliberate, as if afraid she might vanish if he moved too fast. He reached out, but stopped short, letting the distance between them carry the weight of decades of misunderstanding. All these years, I believed I lost you. I blamed myself. I thought I had failed. But I see now, none of it was your choice. Angela's eyes filled with tears. I tried to protect you. I thought if I ran, I could keep our family safe from them. I thought if I stayed, they'd take my child. I thought you'd be forced to choose between me and your family. So I ran, and I carried the guilt every single day." Jonathan shook his head, stepping closer now, his voice breaking with emotion. "Angela, you never left me. You never abandoned me. If I had known the truth, if I had known you were keeping us safe, I would have found you sooner. I would have fought for you, for her, for our family." Angela covered her face with her hands, silent sobs escaping. Jonathan lowered himself to sit on the couch beside her, careful to respect her space but close enough that she could feel his presence, his sincerity. He reached out, gently touching her shoulder. "I would never have let anything happen to you. I promise, nothing, no one could have made me leave you." Lila watched from the side, her own eyes wide and tearing up. For the first time in her life, she saw the weight of her mother's pain and the intensity of Jonathan's remorse. The room, small and worn, was suddenly filled with something neither of them had expected: hope. Angela lifted her head slowly, meeting his gaze. "All these years, I thought you hated me, that you would never forgive me." Jonathan shook his head firmly, his hand now covering hers. "Hate? No. I never hated you. I waited, I searched, I hoped. I never stopped thinking about you, about us." She trembled, feeling the truth in his words. A lifetime of fear, of separation, of sorrow began to loosen its grip. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "I was so afraid." "I know," Jonathan said softly, "and I understand now. Everything you did, it was for love, and I would never have blamed you. Never." For a long moment, they sat there in silence. The apartment seemed smaller, the air heavier with emotion, yet lighter too, as if decades of misunderstanding were finally beginning to lift. Angela's tears streamed freely now, but for the first time, they were not only tears of sorrow, they were tears of relief, recognition, and the fragile promise of a future finally coming together. Lila reached out and took both of their hands in hers. The small apartment held 3 hearts finally beginning to connect, mending cracks that had lasted nearly 20 years. Outside, the world continued, but inside, time seemed to pause, allowing them at last to confront the past, to embrace the present, and to imagine a future none of them had dared hope for until this very moment. Jonathan's hands trembled as he held the small envelope from the DNA testing center. The thought of finally knowing the truth both terrified and exhilarated him. Lila sat beside him, her small hand clutching his arm, sensing the tension radiating from the billionaire. She worried. What if the results didn't confirm what they all hoped? What if he turned away, disappointed or angry after so many years of absence? Angela watched silently, a mixture of fear and hope swirling in her chest. She had spent years protecting her daughter, shielding her from the wealthy world Jonathan inhabited. And now, after decades of running, everything had led to this moment. Jonathan slowly opened the envelope, his heart pounding in his chest. His eyes scanned the page, and then he froze. He read the words again, unable to believe what they said. 99.9% probability, parent-child match confirmed. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, without warning, Jonathan sank into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. A deep, shuddering sob escaped him, echoing in the small apartment. I'm so sorry," he whispered through his tears. "I should have been there. I should have known. I should have never let you grow up without me." Angela reached out and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of his remorse. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're here now." Lila, tears streaming down her cheeks, finally allowed herself to hope. She whispered, "So, you really are my dad?" Jonathan looked up, his face wet with tears, eyes red but shining with love and relief. "Yes, Lila, I am. And I promise you, I'll never leave you again. I'll spend every day making up for the time I lost." The 3 of them sat together, a fragile but powerful sense of family beginning to bloom in the small apartment. Years of distance, misunderstandings, and fear of loss melted away in that single moment. The truth had been revealed. Jonathan was truly Lila's father, and nothing, not wealth, not fear, not time, could take away what had just been restored. Jonathan insisted on immediate action. Within days, he arranged for Angela and Lila to move into a comfortable, secure apartment in a quiet neighborhood, far from the struggles they had endured. The space was small compared to his mansion, but to Angela and Lila, it felt like a sanctuary. Clean, bright, and filled with warmth, it was a home where fear could no longer shadow their days. Doctors were quickly brought in to attend to Angela. She underwent thorough examinations, her illnesses treated with care she had long been denied. Medications arrived without concern for cost, and Jonathan stayed close, monitoring her progress and ensuring she received the best care possible. Slowly, her strength returned, the color in her cheeks growing richer with each passing week. Lila, for her part, felt a mixture of wonder and cautious hope. Jonathan didn't try to rush their bond. He knew trust couldn't be demanded. It had to be earned. He spent time with her each day, teaching her small things, listening to her stories, and laughing gently when she shared her thoughts. He introduced her to things she had never experienced before: new books, games, and even art supplies that she could use without fear of scarcity. School became a fresh start. Lila enrolled in a nearby school with supportive teachers who nurtured her curiosity. Jonathan ensured she had everything she needed: supplies, uniforms, and encouragement to explore her talents. For the first time in her life, she could focus on being a child rather than surviving day to day. Sports, painting, and reading became part of her daily routine, restoring the childhood that had been stolen from her. Angela watched quietly, seeing the transformation in her daughter. Lila's laughter began to fill the apartment in ways that had been impossible in their cramped, struggle-filled home. The presence of Jonathan, once a source of fear and uncertainty, had become a pillar of safety and support. She began to trust him as he had never allowed anyone else to enter their lives, slowly but genuinely. Evenings were no longer silent and heavy. They shared meals together, told stories, and planned for the future. Angela's health stabilized, and her energy returned, her smile slowly brightening each day. Jonathan's presence was steady, consistent, and filled with the love he had carried for years, finally free to give it without hesitation. For Lila and her mother, life had begun anew. The fear, the hunger, and the endless struggle were being replaced with security, warmth, and hope. The bond they had all dreamed of, father, mother, and daughter together, was finally forming, promising a future rich not just in wealth, but in love, care, and belonging. Bookmark, Mark. The years of separation, the hidden truths, and the fear of the unknown had finally come to an end. Jonathan, Angela, and Lila now sat together in their new home, a quiet moment between the chaos of revelations and the warmth of reunion. The mansion and the world of wealth that once seemed so distant now felt secondary. What mattered most had always been closer than Jonathan had allowed himself to see: family, trust, and love. Jonathan's eyes lingered on Lila as she laughed softly at something her mother said. Her resilience amazed him, the courage she had carried since the age of 10, the way she had fought every hardship for the sake of her mother. That strength, so rare and pure, had drawn him to her that first day at the mansion, and it continued to humble him now. He had missed so many years, but the bond forming in these quiet moments promised a lifetime of connection. Angela, watching Jonathan and Lila together, felt her own heart lighten. The fear she had carried for decades, fear of losing her child, fear of Jonathan's family, fear of exposing the truth, was slowly giving way to relief and hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to envision a future where love, not survival, guided her every decision. Jonathan, finally able to speak without the weight of withheld truths, took both their hands in his. "I will never let either of you go again," he promised, his voice trembling yet firm. "No wealth, no time, and no obstacle will ever come between us again. You are my family, and that is the greatest fortune I could ever hold." In that moment, it became clear that money, power, and success were meaningless without the warmth of a family united. The hidden past, the missed years, and the pain of absence had been costly, but they had also led to a reunion built on truth, courage, and unwavering love. Together, Jonathan, Angela, and Lila stepped into a future defined not by wealth, but by the priceless value of being truly together. What a journey this has been. From a young girl selling fruit under the scorching sun, carrying the weight of her mother's illness and their struggles, to walking into the life of a billionaire she never expected to meet. This story reminds us of the strength of resilience and the power of truth. Lila's courage, Angela's sacrifices, and Jonathan's long-held love all teach us something priceless. No fortune, no mansion, no success can replace the warmth of family and the bonds that define it. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in Lila's shoes, facing a man who might be your father? How about Angela, forced to protect her child from a powerful world she didn't trust? Or Jonathan, discovering the truth after so many years of longing and regret? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know where you're watching from, too. Are you in New York, Los Angeles, London, or somewhere else in the world? If this story touched you, don't forget to like the video, share it with friends who love real-life millionaire and billionaire stories, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire, shock, and move you. Remember, life often surprises us when we least expect it. And sometimes, the people we've been searching for aren't just memories. They're waiting, right in front of us. So tell me, what would you have done if you were Lila, Angela, or Jonathan?